How you doing, Ryan Dintz? Good to
Yeah,
see you,
good,
mate.
good. How are you?
Yeah, good, good. You've been busy, and so is the Bitcoin market, which is where you are focused, and that's what your article today focuses on. In fact, Hell Daily, there was a significant thing that happened yesterday, and it's actually I didn't realise that it was the second time it's happened in the last year, I believe, where Bitcoin has overtaken the market cap of silver. Is that right? As a monetary asset,
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep.
perhaps you want to explain how that occurs and the significance of it.
Yeah. So, basically, if you just look at the market cap of assets, so basically the price times the supply, Bitcoin over the years has gone further up that league ladder. And you're right. I think it did overtake silver earlier this year, and then came back down. And just last week, it's jumped ahead of silver. So all the available Bitcoin in the world times the price now is more valuable than all the available silver in the world times that price. That's significant because historically, gold and silver were the two main monetary commodities. Yeah, silver in early America was actually the main monetary metal. So the dollar was backed by silver. They switched to gold along with the UK and France were probably first to do that. And because of their success, America switched eventually. But China and Asia stayed on a silver metal standard for a long time, into the early 1900s, I think even. Um, so silver's always been that alternate monetary commodity to gold. Has similar properties. It's scarce. It can't be replicated. Um, but so that's the interesting thing is that Bitcoin is a digital commodity and it's a digital monetary commodity, and the fact that it's overtaken silver now is a milestone. It's people are looking for ways to put some of their money outside the fiat system, which is the monetary system we live in now, which is backing by nothing. It's just backed by government promises, essentially, and debt. Gold was the way to have some money outside of that system, and maybe silver. And now it's gold and Bitcoin. And we're seeing Bitcoin. It's not just the fact it's overtaken silver; it's the trajectory it's on. It's
Yeah.
catching up with gold, and we're still about a tenth. I don't know the exact figure, but I'd say roughly a tenth the size of the gold market cap. So Bitcoin's still a fair way off the gold market cap. But you're getting some serious players. So a senator in America, for example, Cynthia Lummis, who's a senator for Wyoming, she's proposing that the US sell some of their gold stockpile, which they hold in Fort Knox, and put some of those proceeds into Bitcoin as a Bitcoin strategic reserve. You've just this week you've got a Polish presidential campaigner saying he wants to set up a national Bitcoin reserve. El Salvador already has a national reserve. They buy one Bitcoin a day, and they have been for the last 2 or 3 years. Um, so the trend is your friend, as the old market saying goes, and you can see the trend is very much in favor of Bitcoin right now, and that's been just turbocharged by the Trump win because you've gone from a Biden administration, which was fairly anti-crypto. They even had a few politicians on the Democratic side who said they were running an anti-crypto army. um, to a Trump administration. Remember, Donald Trump presented at the Bitcoin conference last year. He's on record as saying he thinks Bitcoin is a valuable monetary commodity that should be legal, and the US should be number one in it. So it's quite the shift we're seeing, and people need to pay attention. And the price moves are starting to reflect that serious attention.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned. Oh, before I ask you about this, sorry, I don't want to jump around, but you
Yeah.
mentioned Loomis and wanting to proposing for the US to sell some of its gold.
Mhm.
But how likely is that, regardless of how
Uh,
supportive the administration in the White House is?
I think there's a few different angles to this. So to give you the odds right now, I think Polymarket, which we talked about last week, which is a place where you can a prediction market where you can bet on anything. I think that's got a
Yeah,
50-50 chance of this happening right now.
right.
A few weeks ago it was like 20%. So traders and punters are betting that this is more likely. But there's a few things that are probably likely under a Trump presidency. So number one is that they probably won't sell the Bitcoin they already hold, which is about 215,000 worth. So that was earmarked to be sold under the previous administration, and that provided a sort of, a bit of not worry, but the Bitcoin market was all saying, well, when are the American government going to dump their Bitcoin, and that could cause some, temporary
Yeah,
slowdown in price. So that threat is probably almost, not can't say definite, but almost not going to happen. Will they set up a strategic reserve and buy more Bitcoin? That's the Loomis proposal. She wants to have 1 million Bitcoin in the US government own. again, that's probably a 50-50 of happening. But what will definitely probably happen is um, the fact that Trump is pro Bitcoin means the regulations on the crypto industry in general will get a lot more lax, a lot easier for entrepreneurs to establish businesses. Trump has talked about removing capital gains taxes on Bitcoin, saying, why should you pay tax buying a coffee with money, with Bitcoin?
Mm.
And I think all that stuff definitely is in the conversation. And another idea is a Bitcoin Bill of Rights, entrenching some of the aspects of Bitcoin, the key one being self custody. So you being able to hold Bitcoin in your own wallet. That is one of the superpowers of Bitcoin. No other asset can you, apart from cash in your wallet, there's no other asset where you can do that. You can do that with Bitcoin. So I think that all these trends are in the right direction. I personally, and I'm just my educated guess, I think America will set up a Bitcoin strategic reserve, and I
Mhm.
think the 20th of January is when we'll get some announcement on that when Donald Trump is inaugurated.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll just do it adjacent to the gold reserves or actually selling gold to buy. That would be even more significant, I guess.
I don't know what the mechanics with it, but I'll give
Yeah.
you one clue: is that one of there's two favorites for the position of treasurer, or what the American equivalent of treasurer. I think it's treasurer or secretary. I can't remember what the exact name is. I think I think Janet Yellen is the current one. So there's two names, and one of the names to use a 50-50 on this as well is a guy called Howard Lutnick, and he's the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, who are one of 20 primary dealers in US bonds, US government bonds. Now, if he gets the treasurer's role, he's a massive Bitcoin fan. He says he owns hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin personally. His
Hmm.
company manages the bond portfolio of a stablecoin company called Tether, which is a massive holder of U.S. government debt and a very fast growing holder of U.S. government debt. So if someone like Howard Lutnick gets that role as treasurer, and then you've got a pro Bitcoin Donald Trump, you've got senators like Cynthia Lummis. Um, I think in the piece I wrote, there's like something like 15 pro Bitcoin senators likely to be part of Trump's team. So the chances of there being some movement on this are pretty high, in my opinion.
Mm.
And look, is that a good thing for Bitcoin? Look, it is and it isn't. It's going to be good for the price, definitely. But part of my role, I've been telling people to buy Bitcoin for 10 years. And I always try and tell people to buy it the proper way, to buy it in a consistent way, treat it almost like savings, even though it is a volatile investment, but think of it like a saving strategy. To put it in your own wallet, self custody, make sure you
Hmm.
do that properly, make sure you do that safely. There's a learning curve to Bitcoin, but if enough people do that, Bitcoin becomes this uncensorable asset where it's distributed as widely as possible with individual people. It's not just held by governments like what gold is. And I think if Bitcoin can keep that aspect to its ecosystem, then yeah, the government coming in will be good for price. But as long as there's enough individuals that still own it and hold it, that'll keep the ecosystem free and fair and censorship resistant and give it the superpowers that it makes it valuable in the first place.
Mm. Well, let's come back to the question I was going to ask before. I just had a little interesting that I wanted to get you on. But uh, so one of the things you draw on in your piece is the noted divergence between the Bitcoin performance and the gold price performance since Trump's election. Um, so I wanted to ask, beyond Trump's presidency, what structural factors do you see driving a potential changing of guard in monetary assets?
Well, just to come to that divergence, so like I pointed out in today's piece, when Trump got elected, gold has sort of dipped since then, and Bitcoin has gone the other way, which is unusual. Well, sort of unusual because at times Bitcoin and gold run off the same macro themes. The one's digital gold essentially, Bitcoin, and one's is proper gold. So what has happened is for gold, the macro theme has changed slightly, where they think interest rates might not come down as fast, and so that's meant Bitcoin has that meant gold has had a dip in price, but normally that would apply to Bitcoin too. But what's changed there is the political situation, and I can't not say that because there was all this
Mm.
left tail risk of an adversarial US government, which has always been there, and Bitcoin has risen despite that. But that left tail risk of an adversarial US government has just evaporated overnight. So the immediate response from the market is to say, we need to reprice this thing higher, because suddenly that left tail risk has disappeared. So if you're trying to work out the value of something, you try and work out the possible returns. versus the possible risk.
Hmm.
So you've just had this massive change in the dynamic, and that's why you're seeing a rush of people to get into it, because that left tail risk, at the very least, like I said, the left tail risk has disappeared of an adversarial government. Then on the return side, you've got the chance of a US government actively trying to buy Bitcoin in a market where there are already companies like MicroStrategy buying up as much Bitcoin as they can. There's other corporations coming to the party trying to buy Bitcoin. Billionaires like I think it's what's his name, Paul Tudor Jones. I read today in regulatory filings it was disclosed he'd bought 5 times more Bitcoin on his fund than he had last quarter. So you've got billionaires, you've got funds, you've got nation states, all potentially going to become buyers of Bitcoin. And yet, the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is, and individuals can buy in now and try, if I'm right anyway, try to front run that process. They always have. They've been able to do that for the last 15 years, but they can still do it, in my opinion, because if that is what's happening, if there is this massive change in how Bitcoin is perceived from a outsider's asset into an insider's asset, then the price of Bitcoin has to go higher because there's not enough Bitcoin to go around. And as an individual, you can get in front of that process. You can allocate some Bitcoin to your portfolio in a smart way. You can hold it in your own wallet, and then you can follow the stories and follow the trends. So yeah, the opportunity's still there, even though we're at new all-time highs. It's still not. It's still a tiny part of the global market, but it's a tiny part of the global market that's getting interest from the biggest players in the market for the first time. This never happened in any one of those other bull markets we had. Every other bull market, bear market cycle we've had has always been retail people like me and you buying, people getting excited, buying into the frenzy. And then when the bear market hits, all that money comes out the other way and there's no one to prop it up. Now you've got big corporations with long-term hands buying in. They're not traders. They're not
What
retail money.
you mentioned long term. What happens, for example, and this could be a dumb question, so please but I'm thinking of things, and I just want to. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So obviously, with what's happened in the US, and you got January the 20th when Trump gets inaugurated, and that's when his thing
Agenda.
comes in for real. His agenda starts properly, but it's an agenda for the next 4 years. What happens when and if, say, I don't know, um, what's going to happen within the network that's going to make that go beyond 4 years and be a really long term monetary asset? Or is it? Or could things change again? Do you know what I mean? If like say, I don't know, maybe a not so favourable administration comes in the
Yeah,
future, or is that not even a?
it's all possible, but think about how long has the golden Fort Knox been held by America? It's
Yeah.
probably been there since World War II. They've not sold it, but there has been risks to that because what has happened with gold over the last 70 years, to a degree, it's been demonetized. Paper gold has overtaken the physical gold market. You don't really know how much gold is in and where it is in the world. So the gold sort of lost its property of being a transparent hedge to a monetary system. It got consumed by the monetary system almost, and then but the actual gold that the US has had in Fort Knox is probably just sitting there in a room in Fort Knox. So
But that's
if
telling in and of
so
itself,
that's
isn't it?
that's the risk. Yeah, that's the risk of these players coming into Bitcoin. But the difference with Bitcoin is that it is auditable in real time.
Mm.
It's a digital asset. It's not a commodity that's fixed in a warehouse. It's digitally auditable. People can try and play games with Bitcoin, but it's very easy to find. Or it's a lot easier and quicker to be found out. Give you an example: the FTX exchange in 2022 that went bust, that some people might have heard of. It was selling Bitcoin to some customers that it didn't have, and it got away with it for a bit. And then there was a crash and a big redemption of people wanting their Bitcoin back, and that process takes a few minutes, and eventually got to the point where they didn't have the Bitcoin. So the scam was up. They got found out. They went bust. The founder's gone to prison. So you can try and run those games with Bitcoin too, but it's like you're at risk of a real time bank run. And there's also other tools. There's on chain analysts that are looking at addresses. Say BlackRock ETF. There's analysts looking to find the addresses of those ETFs and matching them up with regulatory filings to make sure they hold the Bitcoin they say they do. So Bitcoin's got some superpowers over gold in being transparent and very hard to game in the same way that gold maybe became. So I don't know if that answers your question, but what I was saying before is the buyers buying in are probably going to hold Bitcoin forever. Government
Mm.
players, why would they sell? The corporations like MicroStrategy are not sellers; they're never going to sell. Um, is the risk of a future administration? I think this was the election where it could have had a adversarial thing. There was a bit of a crypto lobby in this US election, and all the candidates they supported got up. So there's a lesson in that for politicians, and politicians will heed those lessons. So I don't think we'll see the Democrats necessarily become anti-crypto, but politicians, being politicians, will always try to find ways to control things, and that's something you've always got to be aware of in Bitcoin and crypto. But then the other point is you've got to remember it's a global marketplace. And that's one of the defensive mechanisms. People in China have Bitcoin, people in Russia have Bitcoin, people in
Mm.
Scotland have Bitcoin, people in Papua New Guinea have Bitcoin.
Really, they have it in Scotland.
Even in Scotland, yeah, you get a free can of Iron Brew with every Bitcoin purchase. But yeah, so the point is, it's a distributed system. Miners are all over the world, users are all over the world, nodes are all over the world, different wallet providers, different entrepreneurs building on it. So it's very hard to control. And when you've got the big dog in town, the US, the one country that maybe can exert a lot of global influence, going from being sort of anti it to being pro it, that's a sea change. That's a massive signal. And that is why the Bitcoin price rose $8,000 in one day last week. That was the
Yeah.
biggest one day rise in record. Now, to people who don't follow this stuff, you think, oh, it's high, it's probably overheated, it's a bubble. But what they don't realize is this is just a repricing of risk. This is a massive repricing of risk. And I don't know how long that process will go on for. And, we'll see what Trump says and does. Could be two
Yeah.
different things. And we could see some toning down of certain promises. But the risk is definitely been vastly reduced from where it was.
Um, a question which kind of is reflective also of so people see the price moving, right, and that always gets people excited and everything. But there's another graph that you show today in your piece, and it's from the guy called Tim Peterson.
Yep.
What does he do again? Let me just check.
He runs like a cake. I think it's called Kane Digital Research, like
Kane
an
Digital Research. Yeah,
yeah.
that's it. But what's significant about the thing is, even though the price has gone up, the chart that he references and you reference in your piece suggests we're still early in the cycle, because you might want to explain it, but it shows that the current levels are only 60% above the mid-cycle trend in a usual cycle.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a
Might
hard one to
explain it
explain
further.
without the graph there, but even I've got my own momentum metrics that I look at. But what the metrics are sort of showing is that, yeah, we're entering the phase where people are starting to get a little bit greedy, right? And in any asset, when that happens, it can be time to take some profits. But in Bitcoin's case, the greed cycles can go on longer than what people realize as well. And some of the big moves come when people are greedy for longer than what you think. And yeah, this is yeah, you got it here. Excellent. So this is the Bitcoin cycle indicator. So it's basically, this indicator is like a measurement of buying strength, and I would say sort of sentiment as well. And you can see it does the ups and downs, and that just follows. And it follows the Bitcoin price cycles really well, even though it's not show. This is not showing the Bitcoin price cycles, but it shows it sort of, if you superimpose that against price, it would show like the buying strength, and it would fit very well to the cycles. And if you look at the on the far right, you can see that we're out of the bear market, the sort of low part of where no one wants to buy. We're getting to the point where it's getting to that buying strength is positive. But look how far we can go. We're only on about 16% right now. We in a proper bull market, we can go all the way up to like
You go to these
80,
peaks.
80% plus. And so it's an early stage, I think. So we're at around about $90,000 a Bitcoin. And if I look at this indicator and look at where we're at now versus other times, the prices have doubled from where we are now to those high points where an 80% before it starts to cool down again. So I'm not saying that will happen, but you could see us rise from 90,000 to 150, 180,000 before we get the first significant pullback. So that's a chance, and that's just basically going off that metric. Now, in those previous times, we went from the overheated bit to the bear market cycle,
all the way,
all the way back down. That's what we're talking about before. Does that bear market cycle come? It might not if we're getting nation states buying, not if we're getting corporations like MicroStrategy looking to put it on their treasury as a long-term asset. Not if we're getting funds like Bernstein, who are referenced in the article today, who are adding these to their portfolios. Now, when they add these to these portfolios, they're not trading in and out based on the quarter. They're adding a percentage into a portfolio and maybe rebalancing once a year, but they're never selling all of it. It is now just a part of a portfolio, 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever that figure is. So that's all happening. So I wonder, and I don't know this for sure, but I wonder, I think we keep on going higher in the short term. So from now through to March, say. Um, but we will get pullbacks, and Bitcoin is known for its volatility, but we will get vicious pullbacks probably. And when that happens, the strength of the narrative gets tested and the strength of the holders gets tested. But I wonder if the long drawn out 1 year, 2 year bear markets we've had in the past are gone. If it's just up, then we get a pullback, and then that allows people to get in who maybe missed the boat the first time, and then we get another cycle. So that's the maybe that's greed talking. Maybe that's the euphoric part.
Well, it is. I think I did see somewhere right now. You got that fear indicator, and right now I believe Bitcoin is at extreme greed.
It's at extreme greed. Yeah, is that greed? I think it might have just entered extreme greed last year. But like I said, I've looked at that indicator before, and I've correlated that against price, and it can stay in extreme greed for like 2 or 3 months, and the price can go. In the early cycles, I'm talking about 2017, 18. It's done a 5 times or 10 times its price level, staying in greed, the extreme greed the whole way. Now, I don't think it will do 5 times, 10 times. We're a lot higher up in price now. That's when Bitcoin was worth like $2,000. But we're in extreme greed. We're at all-time highs at 90,000, and yet there's other subtle indicators. I'm not getting family, or no, I'm not getting friends phoning me or texting me asking to buy Bitcoin yet. Google searches have only just come up a little bit in the last day. I've seen mainstream articles deriding Bitcoin still, just casually dismissing it. The RBA governor was out last week, Michelle Bullock, the new RBA governor, saying she didn't understand it, but it's definitely not currency and not worth bothering your time with. These are all good signs for me, because these are signs that people are still stuck on what they think Bitcoin is without understanding what it is, and they're not understanding the environment it exists in. As an investor, you don't want everyone to be saying things are great, because that's usually when the tops are in. So the fact that the critics are still confident enough to come out and scoff at Bitcoin is a good sign, in my opinion, because that's when you can get a position. It's only when everyone changes their mind and suddenly says, maybe this is so great that you think about taking some profits. But I don't think we're anywhere near there yet, in my opinion.
You mentioned the potential in January, especially when Trump gets inaugurated, when he lays out his plan, his agenda, right? And it'd be a huge thing. One of the things you're anticipating is that some kind of or announcement related to the Bitcoin market will happen. Maybe it's the US strategic stockpile, perhaps. I don't know. But that'd be a big thing. But that's on a federal level, right? Is there? What about on the state level?
Yeah. So the amazing thing in the US, the states have quite a lot of power, and they have their own treasurers and their own budgets, and they're getting ahead of this. Yeah. The state of Pennsylvania, which people probably know about now because it was a key state in the election, they've just put up a bill saying they want to own a strategic reserve. And so they've got a bill before their parliament. So you might get states in America who've got fairly large budgets putting their own Bitcoin reserves in. If Florida, the chief investment officer of the state of Florida, has urged their firefighters unions and other things to add Bitcoin to their portfolios, and a lot of them already have. So that's already happening in America. Unfortunately, and really annoyingly for me, is in Australia, the super funds here still seem disinterested, and I really feel that we're not. We're going to miss the boat on this in Australia, just because we're stuck in the thinking that crypto and Bitcoin is something that is bad, so we won't worry about it, not realizing that America is moving full steam ahead with this. Europe's probably the same. Europe's still stuck in a situation where they don't want Bitcoin and crypto to succeed, forgetting that the longer you wait, the further you fall behind in accruing some of those benefits. But in America, the states are leading. The Wyoming senator, like I said, Cynthia Lummis, I think her state has already got favorable Bitcoin legislation where they own some. Texas has rules that allow Bitcoin mining to help stabilize their grid. So there is stuff happening. Poland, like I said, the Polish president's come out, or presidential candidate came out saying he wants to set up a strategic reserve. So the point you've got to remember is there's only a certain amount of Bitcoin available. And there's only the amount released, the amount of new Bitcoin released falls every 4 years. There's already of the 21 million Bitcoin there will ever be, about 19 and a half is already out there. and that remaining 1.5 is going to be released over the next 130 odd years at a less and less amount. So if America does say it is going to do the strategic reserve, you need to get in before they do, because you might never have a chance to catch up. That'd be the equivalent of them mining all the gold and you just sitting there on your fiat money stockpile having no gold, and suddenly you find out your fiat money's worthless. So I think you would hope anyway that if Trump does say something in his speech, that countries like Australia will start to take this seriously and not just be stuck in their ideological paradigm of not liking it, and realize that this is an asset for the 21st century. And if you don't have an asset, if you don't have a stake in it now, you will miss out in the future.
And I guess that's what I love about our business. To be honest, you can wait for the government to do something, but the best way to do anything is to research it on your own, off your own back, and that's what we kind of help people do. Whether it's the resource sector, whether it's the macro stuff, whether it's value investing, whether it's Bitcoin, which for some readers is quite a controversial thing to cover. But for everyday Australians, Ryan, who may be either new to it or hesitant, or even an old hat, but I suspect it's the previous two categories of people that probably be more thinking about this. But what are the practical approaches that you'd recommend for getting exposure to the trend in a sensible way, and to
Yeah,
mitigate because there are still risks, right? There's still
yeah.
hugely
There's
volatile,
the
and
risks.
the other big risks also is obviously it's just making a mistake while doing it,
Yeah,
sending
it's a new digital asset class, and it comes with new risks, and it comes with a new bank of knowledge you have to build in. So a lot of people I know who bought Bitcoin in previous bull markets sold it when it went down because they didn't never took the time to understand it. So the risk is your own knowledge as well. Look, I probably don't want to give
allegations.
a flippant answer to this question because it is a big
Yeah.
question. But as you know, I do have a course, a 4-week course that we just created, a few months back, which is probably, I'm glad we did now, because we've got a 4-week introduction course. The course is called the Bitcoin Investors Launchpad, and it is a step-by-step guide to take someone from having no Bitcoin experience to going to that stage of buying their first Bitcoin, starting up their own wallet, setting all that up safely, storing it all safely, thinking about inheritance, other stuff like that. And it's a step by step process deliberately, because this is something new and you've got to take your time with it. And it comes
Hmm.
with a bunch of reports that give you the big picture behind Bitcoin and how Bitcoin fits in the current monetary system. A bunch of videos that show you how to do it. So it is a big topic, though. It is, this 4-week course should take you from day one of not knowing anything, but by the end of it, you should own some Bitcoin. You should know why you own it. You should know in what proportions of your overall portfolio you own it. You should know the risks you need to manage. And you'll probably, and this is not an exaggeration, but I think after the course finishes, you'll know more than 99% of all Australians, including professional finance people, on what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it's a good thing to have as part of your portfolio. I've never ever said to anyone, sell the house and buy Bitcoin, even though that would be a marvelous decision to have made from a monetary perspective. The volatility would just be too much for
Yeah.
anyone normal person to handle. I've got parents as well who buy Bitcoin. I tell them just buy a little bit. Just have some sitting there as a long term asset. Don't look at it too often. And I show them how to do it properly. So you have to think about all that. There's a bunch of psychological risks you've got to think of as well. But what I think that course is probably the perfect way for someone who's not no information to get into it and to learn how to do this properly. Um, but this story will play out for years as well. But my point of today's piece and the point of the pieces I've been writing recently is that we are at a different point than any other cycle of Bitcoin. There's never been a point where, think about it, a couple of years ago, could I have imagined the sitting president of the United States would be actively even discussing the idea of a Bitcoin strategic reserve?
Mm.
No way. We're deep in a bear market. People were saying Bitcoin was dead. It was, crypto was going to zero. Now we're back at record highs. We've got the US talking about this. You've got states leading the way. You've got billionaires buying it. You've got Larry Fink of BlackRock on mainstream television saying everyone should have some Bitcoin exposure. So there is been a sea change, and the election of Trump is a pivotal moment. It's not just a knee-jerk reaction. The price is reacting for very good reasons. You need to understand those reasons before you buy, but I think when you understand what's coming, then the next step is, how do I have an allocation that makes sense to me in my situation? How do I do it properly? And that's what the Bitcoin Investors Launchpad course is designed to do.
Good stuff. We'll leave it there, Brian. Brian, keep calling you Brian today. I was just so that everyone knows I've been chatting to our other guy, our other editor over the weekend, so that's why. Anyway, Ryan, thank you so much for your time. Really interesting conversation. Bitcoin Investors Launchpad. We'll get it flashed up on the screen so that you can click on that and check it out. And of course, there's the link to Ryan's article below in Fact Held Daily. 100% free. Check it out. Till next week. Thanks, Ryan.